3, 2, 1. We are on. Welcome to By the Way, the podcast. Our guests are Dr. Jane Wathuta from Strathmore University, Institute of Family Studies and Ethics, if I'm not mistaken. And again, if I'm not mistaken, recently confirmed as the Dean of Strathmore University Law School. So congratulations on that. If you think congratulations are in order, I know some people are scared by those appointments. So yeah. And then I suppose Sussie is from the same institute. I don't know if she's also from the law school.
Sussie, you can confirm your identity.
Okay, great. Yes, so I am from the same Institute of Family Studies and Ethics and also Strathmore Law School. That's where I teach.
Excellent. So thank you so much, both of you, for joining us this evening. We felt the need to invite some experts on board because the last few episodes of our podcast, we've been talking a lot about families. It started with an amendment bill that had been moved to Parliament about 2 months ago now to try and enshrine the right to divorce by mutual consent into the Marriage Act, Kenya Marriage Act 2015, if I'm not mistaken. Now, of course, we were pretty alarmed by this because we think on By the Way podcast here that we like families, and we didn't see why such an amendment would be proposed. And so we slandered the MP who had moved the amendment, but we thought, maybe it's best to get an expert on or some experts on to talk about this, because we are not experts on this topic at all. And then the episode after that, we talked about this again because we found out some very alarming information about families. Found that a significant number of marriages in Kenya now end in divorce. Now, unfortunately, that data was from a thesis that had not been published, so we could not get the actual source. So I don't know if this is something that has also been found in your research at the Institute of Family Studies. And then we've talked about families again and again in other episodes. So the reason you're here, I suppose, is to chat with us about this. Or if you think right now that this topic is not very interesting, then you can start another one. Our podcast is free. So I guess the first question, which is a very generic one from me, is the Kenyan family in a good state? I suppose in this case I'll be saying to whom the question is addressed, because there's two of you and we don't want awkward silences. I'll direct this to Dr. Wathuta. Based on the work that you guys are doing at the Institute of Family Studies, is it something like, is there a big crisis, or are things okay? The numbers that these people gave me, that up to 70% of all marriages in Kenya now end in divorce. Now, I don't know how the marriages were classified, whether they included can we stay people and all that, but is it really that bad?
Okay, thank you, Matthew, for this invitation to this podcast, by the way, and for recognizing the presence, the existence, and the relevance of the Institute for Family Studies and Ethics of Strathmore University. So, by way of kicking off the conversation, is the Kenyan family in a good state? Obviously, it's not an easy question to answer. On one hand, yes, statistics do matter. If I start from the point of view of what our law says, which is always an aspiration, is an indication of our aspiration as Kenyans, I can take us back to the Universal Declaration of Human Rights in Article 16, which talks about the need to the rights that family have to be recognized and protected, the right to marry and found a family and so on. So that is one of this Universal Declaration of Human Rights is recognized in Kenya and is upheld, at least in terms of the values it enshrines. So are other human rights instruments, like the International Covenants on Civil and Political Rights, Coming Closer Home, the African Charter on Human and People's Rights. Our Constitution, the Constitution of Kenya in Article 45 also recognizes the need to protect the family. So I would say in an aspirational way, the family is or can count itself as being in a good space, that the Kenyan government, the Kenyan people value the family, they want to recognize it, they want to protect it. And then, of course, it's not the Kenyan government entirely to say how families should conduct themselves, it's also the parties concerned. So it's up to us as Kenyan citizens, those of marriageable age or married, and even children to the extent that they're able to do something about it, or elderly persons, to ensure that the family is being recognized and protected in its various spaces and in its various needs. So it's a two-way affair, the law, the policy, but also the active collaboration of the different parties who stand to lose or benefit depending on how the family goes. Thank you.
How does the culture look right now? Are Kenyans, by and large, really interested in the family, and not just by what they say, but as how they act, how we act? Are we really, as a people, have we put the family in the right place? Back to you.
Okay, right. From the culture point of view, I'd say maybe 2 or 3 points. One is that we have a rich cultural legacy that gives due prominence to the family. I think there's no doubt that family, even by way of extended family, polygamous family, all that is a treasure. It's highly held and regarded, and so the role of parents vis-a-vis their children, the role of spouses vis-a-vis each other, even in a traditional setting, which may include polygamy, has tended to have a very high status. But it's true that also culturally, the family has been facing a number of threats. And I think, some of them are not unique to Kenya or to Africa. You have issues like cohabitation in lieu of marriage or before marriage. You have, breakups of family, especially when the couple as such breaks up. So we are not immune to the threats that exist. So we have gradually been imbibing those risks, or at least been maybe courting them in a way that we may not have fully realized. And so we are facing the consequences of the threats that exist both in our country, in our continent, and also the wider world. So culturally, the family remains important, but the family structure has evolved quite a bit. So you came from the polygamous union, at least with the introduction of Christianity and civil law regarding marriage, a preference for the monogamous union between a man and a woman, and of course the recognition of the children coming from that union. But now we have situations where there are many more children coming from single parent families. We have the legalization of divorce, even if it's within certain parameters, and a number of other threats that have therefore conditioned or affected the way the family is viewed or the way it exists in society. Thank you.
Okay, I will direct this other one to Sussie, if you please. How do I put this on the issue Jane touched on of single parent families? The other day, I was with my co-host, Mr. Flatoon here, and a friend of ours came into the house, and among the things he told us, he's a man of remarkable experience. He told us he had gone to a hospital in Homa Bay County and found there lots of children giving birth. I thought he meant to say that he had found a lot of children being given birth to, but he said there was a lot of youngsters, a lot of girls having kids. And this is something we've actually noted, I think, on a previous episode or in one of our conversations that we didn't record, that there's a lot of single mothers, especially in this country. A lot of them. It's become almost normal for girls to get children before marriage or outside the context of marriage, and it's no longer something that's as scandalous as I suppose it used to be. It's quite common. I don't know if this is an impression I'm getting. Maybe I'm just moving in the wrong circles, or is this a reality on the ground? Are we at a historical high in terms of single motherhood, especially among young people, not just people who've been divorced?
Thank you very much, Matthew, for that question. And yes, so from a statistical perspective, at least, because that is how we are able to calibrate the problem, we had the former Minister of Health, Mutahi Kagwe, had given an address, and around the same time, the former president had talked about the rise of single parent families. There was a committee that was set up to look into this, and the statistics that came out of it showed that Kenya was really very high in the number of single parent families. So statistically, yes, that is the case. It's an unfortunate case, especially because it's not just a question of being a parent at a young age. There is also exposure to HIV. And then these children, most of who are school going, have to drop out of school. So the repercussions are not, or they exceed just the fact that their parents. You've seen this happening when we have the national exam. So it has become a staple of the news now, where we see students who are supposed to be sitting their exams having to do it from hospital. So it is an unfortunate case. And yes, it's something that has already been recorded. And I know that there are interventions, there are grants that are being given out by Save the Children, by Plan International, to be able to see how to cap that reality, to see, first of all, what is the cause? Why is this the trend? And then also to be able to find the statistics for it, the solid statistics, so that then we are able to move better towards intervention. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah. I just a quick follow-up on this. As I note, you've mentioned that. Yes.
Let me also, now I'm getting a bit curious now with the statistics.
Yeah, sure.
Now, my question is, when we speak of interventions, there's the penal side to it. There's the how you deal with the offenders. But I don't know, the sense to which I see the policy towards sentencing is perhaps lessening the sentences, because judges now have discretion. But if you consider perhaps the cost to which perhaps the victims have to go through, doesn't that suggest that we should have perhaps heavier sentencing, depending on case-to-case basis? But it seems as if that is a problem, then why is it that the interventions towards convictions are less severe?
As you guys have noticed, Mr. Aflatun here is also a legal mind. So this is not a one-sided fight, Dr. Wathuta. I brought my own lawyer. Anyway, you can answer either of you, I suppose.
I I can go on, Matthew?
Yeah, sure.
All right, great. Yeah, so the Sexual Offences Act has some pretty severe sentences from 15 years to life when you're talking about defilement. And so defilement is where a child, so a person who is younger than 18 years is defiled, and then that makes it an offense, puts it under the Sexual Offences Act. And what happens is it's a graduated penal system depending on the age of the minor. So if they are 4 years, if their age is fairly low, then the penalty is higher in severity as you graduate. Yeah, so the penal system is there, and it's really, really severe. But there is also the other reality about, and this has been a big point of debate about minors who get children with minors. Yeah, so it's still defilement, but you have very close in age persons. You have, so the students we're talking about, for example, the father, and that is already a bit stereotypic. So the partner is in the same class or in a class behind them. The outcome is still a child. So you would say that you have parents, and it would still be defilement in that sense. So you could have the perpetrator who is much older and they're able to coerce or beguile or whatever. But then you could also have people or the perpetrator being someone who is of the same age or even younger. And what that has, so there have been a lot of decisions, a lot of consideration as to what to do. At some point in the country, I think you remember we had talked about lowering the age of consent. So instead of locking up, and usually it was the boys who get locked up because they are the ones who are thought to be able to perform the act of defilement. So the boys are locked up. They are 16, they are 17, so they're locked up. And then what would then happen is that now there is a cry from that end in that situation. So what has happened now is we have a new Children's Act, and this Children's Act seeks to remedy that situation, provides for diversion. And diversion is to say when the prosecutor is prosecuting such a case, they should consider a non-custodial sentence. So don't sentence them, look for something else. Is it counseling? What do we do with the situation that is now in play? You have had decisions. There's one by Justice Chitembwe that is very contested about a minor who was defiled in the way that you're talking about. And they went to court, and basically what they are saying is that, you know, you're sentencing or convicting my boyfriend or my partner, and they don't think that they are wronged in that case. So I think I'll pause there and let someone else take over. Thank you.
Okay.
Dr. I see you unmuted, so please go ahead.
So given, maybe while we are at it, I don't know, because, okay, having in mind the topic of, you know, the divorce, the conversation about divorce, I just maybe could add that there are studies that show that in the case, the presence of a biological father also plays a key role in influencing sexual development, activity, and welfare of young girls. So we need to do more studies on this, or proper studies on this in our country, but it would be very interesting to go back, very important actually, to link the high rise, the high increase in the number of teenage pregnancies with the, just linking it, to the higher prevalence of single parent and normally single mother households, single mother families. So when girls are present, when the girls grow up with a single mother or a stepfather, they are more likely to develop sexually at an earlier age compared to girls who grow up in a home headed by a married mother and a married father. So if they're growing up with a single mom or with a step family, they're likely to menstruate earlier, and they're likely to be sexually active earlier.
Hold on there, sorry. You mean it has an effect even on their biology, like?
On their biology. I'm talking about their biology, because it's of the hormonal disconnect, if you want, or the changed dynamic with the absence of the biological father. So they're more likely to experience a teenage pregnancy, have a child outside wedlock, than girls who are reared in an intact married family. Yeah. So, and there are studies, not local ones, but there are studies to show that. And so it's one of the clear advantages of growing up in an intact, as they call it, an intact married home, yeah, rather than living with an unrelated male, without even talking about issues of abuse that are likely to occur if a girl is living with a man other than her father. Yeah, thank you.
That's interesting in a very morbid sense. Like actual biology changes. Okay,
Yes.
I thought it would be like just sensibility, and psychological development. But if even biology is influenced by the absence or presence of a father in the household, then we're dealing with a problem that is well, I was going to say impossible to solve, but at the very least to be solved, it will take many generations, because it's almost like a self-perpetuating problem, because it's children having children now. I mean, I'm thinking a girl who's, say, 17 or 16 or 15 gets a child, or even older. Already, from my perspective as a man, their value on the marriage marketplace goes to like near zero. Like there's almost no chance she gets married anytime soon, unless she hides that child. And this is harsh, but it's the reality. I don't think men like getting married to women who already have children who are not their own. And so you end up having the same cycle, this girl becoming a woman and keeping a child, but without the father there. And if the child is a boy, then at some age, the boy runs out of control there, because also I am made to understand that it's very hard for women alone to raise boys. They also benefit quite a lot from the presence of the father. Or if it's a girl, then the girl ends up again having a child at a young age, or if not at a young age, then not seeing the value of a father might end up having a child without the father, even at an older age. And so you have the same cycle over and over and over and over again. Is there a point where it ends? Are there cases, for example, maybe in other parts of the world, where such a cycle has been reversed? Or is this all a super new problem and everybody's just grappling with it now?
Oh, okay, good question. If I may add just or touch on something you've said, yeah. So the girls have a greater likelihood of, getting pregnant in their teenage years, and boys who are raised without a father, without their biological father in particular, are more likely to be aggressive and delinquent, and I don't know, that I think can take us back to what Sussie has pointed out, the fact that sometimes the father in that teenage pregnancy could be a peer, could be a classmate, not necessarily a man her father's age or older. So there's a problem also. The problem is exacerbated because their boys are also growing up many times without their father, and that heightens the risk for the girls. In terms of whether there are places where that has been reversed, I wouldn't mind to hear what Sussie says, but I would say I think more importantly is about fostering or maintaining a culture whose norms keep the family intact. Yeah, so some of it can be culture-based, in the sense of even like in the US, race-based and so on. You notice that African Americans, first and foremost, but also Hispanics, have a greater challenge maintaining intact families. But then you also notice the benefits of, say, having intact faith values or religious values. Those enhance fidelity and commitment and all that, which helps the family to thrive and reduces the risk of divorce. So reversing it depends. It has to be about reworking the culture to foster less divorce and more marriage. So I can also give an example, although this is not conclusive, just to say that it's possible for divorce to reduce. So Hungary is quite renowned now for its family-friendly policies. They're incentivizing marriage, incentivizing childbearing, and so on through different, social, cultural, and economic, especially economic means. Yeah, and one of the benefits they have seen is the reduction in divorce rates. Yeah, so it's possible to reduce the divorce rates. They are going back to what they were, according to the recent statistics. They're going back to what they were in the 60s, 70s, which is quite positive, but then that is directly linked to the incentives they've been giving to foster family, to foster family-friendly policies, not just within organizations, but also as a government policy. So I think there's hope of reducing divorce and therefore having more stable families, with all the benefits that follow. Thanks.
Something you'd like to add, Sussie?
I could, very good response by Dr. Wathuta. So initially, previous research seemed to draw a direct line between divorce and certain outcomes that we have already spoken about devastating health outcomes for the children, for the people involved as well. And then usually there's a change of housing. So what happens is after the split, then and within that same petition, there's a question about who gets custody, who gets to visit. There's a question about who stays in the house we were staying in. So you're dividing up property. And anyway, so the previous research seemed to draw a direct line between divorce and the outcomes. More recent research suggests that it's not necessarily because the parents divorced that these things happen. They sort of put something in the middle. And what research is putting in the middle is not necessarily the divorce itself, but the outcomes of the divorce process. And they vary from parent to parent. There are children who probably won't need to leave their home or their school. There are children whose mothers have a greater support group, or their parents, let me put it that way, the parents who have split have a greater support group than others. So now the question is the help or the aid that comes in during that time and after that time is possible to make the outcomes less disastrous. So it could still be that there was a divorce in the family, but if proper action is taken, proper support is made, the outcomes do not necessarily have to be damning. That's what I mean. And those outcomes or the interventions come from different places, come from the state, as in our case. So that bill, what the effect would probably have been, most likely is more divorce outcomes. But now that it was shut down, then that was one way that the state prevented that outcome. But there are other people, other stakeholders, like religious organizations, like education, institutions, like the rest of the family. And maybe more importantly, research, which tells us this is what is likely to happen. And then therefore, support should be targeted in that way. And that, I think, is something that will minimize the disastrous outcomes that we have been talking about.
Sorry. Okay. I want to take a bit of a tangent, if you don't mind. I'm sure this is very relevant. The Institute of Family Studies. Could you tell us a bit more about it? Because I don't know many people who study the family in Kenya. This is probably primarily a factor of my own ignorance, but maybe it's also that there are not that many people. So would you give us a bit more detail about the Institute of Family Studies and Ethics, why you started it, and some of your signature work, especially as regards divorce or anything else that you think is relevant?
Okay, I can go first, and then I'll invite Sussie to say something about an upcoming event related to what you've asked. So Institute for Family Studies and Ethics is part of Strathmore University. Started, I'd say, in its in its foundational aspect, in the inspiration of under the inspiration of the person we consider as the founder of Strathmore University, that's Saint Josemaria Escrivá. So he was a great promoter of the family. The bearers of his vision started Strathmore University, and in various ways have sought to promote the family, through education or parent programs. Strathmore is one of the few universities that has seminars for parents from first to fourth year. Over the course of the student's life, their parents will be invited for a seminar, which will include an educative element. We offer courses on family. Say in the Masters in Applied Philosophy and Ethics, there's a course on ethics of family. In Strathmore Institute also, there's a course on family. The BA program has a course on family studies and human development. So in one or another, Strathmore's show is trying to live up to its foundational vision and mission of promoting the family in its stability and its well-being. So Family Institute in Strathmore was started for the same reason, not by us. Currently, we are the bearers, I don't know, of the responsibility to make it thrive. We're a very small team, primarily Sussie and I, assisted by a number of student interns. Those change every year. Practically, we also have a number of former interns who we now call Friends of IFS. The group is growing, is currently about 30. A number of them are now advocates of the High Court, people who studied in Strathmore Law School. So majority of our interns come from Strathmore University, but a few have come also from other institutions. Currently, we have someone from University of Embu. Previously, we had someone from KU, Kenyatta University, and also University of Nairobi. So we try to promote the family through education promotion, through law and policy reviews and interventions as possible. We do research. We're trying to get funding to promote the various initiatives that we have or that we'd like to embark on. And then of course, we try also to network with institutions that have, in one or another, have a similar ideal or complement our ideal, whether locally. I'd say, for instance, Desa University has a children's institute with which we're acquainted. There's also an African Institute for Children's Studies, AICS, here in Kenya, and we've worked with them. The institutions like USIU that offer courses on family. So and others that I'm not mentioning now, but that are related, whose work is related to what we do. The Kenya Christian Professionals Forum, for instance, one of their pillars is the family.
Allow me, Dr. to interrupt you. Zoom is about to kick us out rudely.
Okay.
So we will retain our dignity and kick ourselves out, and then
very well.
Rejoin using the same link.
Okay, thanks. Yeah.
All right, thank you. All right, we are back.
Very well.
Yes, you are talking about the Kenya Christian Professionals Forum.
Okay. Yes. So I was just saying some of the organizations that we are acquainted with or that we collaborate with, and also internationally, there are a number of flourishing family institutes in the US, in Spain, and a few other places. In Africa, there's not any that I can specifically talk about. So in that sense, this family institute in the universities, Strathmore University, is unique, although looking, of course, to partner with others. So so I'd say our aim is to promote education and disseminate knowledge that is based on research. And so I would invite Sussie now to say something about the kind of research we're doing and of an upcoming initiative in relation to the topic of the day. Thank you.
All right, great. Thank you. So on 23rd of November this year, we are holding a conference. And the purpose of that conference is to examine the patterns that we are seeing from divorce cases. So we have analyzed 100 divorce cases since 2014 to date that are coming from the High Court. And the patterns we are looking for are various patterns, including who is it that usually files for divorce, what are the grounds for divorce, what would we say are the 1, 2, 3 grounds for divorce, are there children involved? So when the parties are seeking dissolution of their marriage, usually in the judgment, there is something about the number of issues, that's children. So are there children involved, but then also what was the length of marriage. So we're trying to draw some patterns, some insights from those 100 divorce proceedings. And the purpose of that exercise now is to work backwards and on now, basically, after knowing what it is that kills marriages, work backwards to what will help strengthen them for those who already are in the institution, also for those who are not yet in the institution. So what interventions, legal interventions, yes, but usually the court can do so much. It just hears the cases, evaluates the law, and gives the verdict. But then, so what after that? So what support is required after that? But more importantly, on the preventive side, what interventions can be put in place to avoid such an outcome? So from a religious perspective, from a psychological perspective as well. So that is what the discussion will be, including also what the impacts of divorce are on the parties themselves, because of course there are impacts on the children. We have some interesting findings on impacts on grandparents. So this is a conference. We'd be very happy if you're able to join us.
When did you say
for
that's
me,
happening?
I have a question on.
Sorry, Aflatun. Let's see. On which date did you say that's happening again? Sorry, Susie.
So that's 23rd November. That's the last Thursday of November.
Okay, excellent. Over to you, Aflatun, sir.
No, as part of the studies you've done, how much does, for instance, cases filed where parties filed for divorce and the court gives them options to go perhaps for mediation? How many of those matters referred to mediation would you perhaps tell us if they still end up leading to divorce or parties reconciling?
All right, that's a great question. So we do not have statistics necessarily for that component, but the Marriage Act 2015 now makes it a requirement that before the parties come to court, they need to show that they have attempted some sort of reconciliation, especially for Christian marriages under Section 65. There's a requirement to show that the parties, when there was a dispute or whatever it is that is culminating in this decision to dissolve the marriage, that before the petition was filed, they did in fact submit themselves to a process that sought to reconciliate or to give them time to think about this course that they're about to take. We have that for Islamic marriages. If you look at the decisions, the Qadis have consistently noted that the parties sought some mediation through family members, someone called their family and so on, or some other process in place. Right now we have court annexed mediation, and so we do not have concrete statistics for how many cases are now referred to that form of mediation, but that is something that we will begin to look into in the future.
That good, Aflatun. For yeah.
Yes, I'll just wait to see.
Okay.
That's sufficient. Yeah.
Okay, excellent. Why? I mean, Kenya, based on what we've talked about earlier, seems to have very similar family crisis to the United States, especially the Black population of the United States. But are there other countries in Africa that might be going through similar, not just similar, but also the same magnitude problems regarding the family? Do we have other parts of the continent where there are such high numbers, high rates of teenage pregnancies and single motherhood and divorce as Kenya? Or is this on the African continent a uniquely Kenyan thing? And if South Africa is one of them, then I do not count South Africa. They have a much more traumatic history than us. So I will remove them as a control. I don't know which of you, Victoria or Susie, might want to tackle this one.
Maybe I could attempt.
Yes.
So statistics, that is an interesting word, because what we're looking for now is research-backed data.
Yeah.
And so when doing a survey like that, what you'd need to know is how many marriages are concluded, and then how many divorces have been filed. Note also that it's not automatic that when a divorce petition is filed, the order is granted. So now you need those two bodies of statistics. But now, more importantly, you need to know about the numbers that are not in the system. So cohabitation, there's no certificate for it necessarily. And then so sort of we wouldn't know when the parting happens. So that is an area that is not already accounted for. So, however, if you look at the demographic health surveys that have been done, so what has happened now is that those studies, the surveys, the demographic health surveys have been used as a form of data collection and analysis. And I will share with you that, say, the divorce rates are not rising in Kenya, at least if you look at it. And the number of 70%, I think, is curiously high. So even from the US side, what some of the research coming in says is about 50% of marriages. And then there's the question about the remarriages that happen. And what we know for sure is that second marriages, so the second marriage, the third remarriage, those ones have up to 73% divorce rates happening. So whether Kenya's is 70%, I think that is a bit of a curious statistic. But the surveys that have already been done based on our data that we give out shows that Kenya is, we are pretty much plateaued. It's not rising, but that's a paper I could share with you, but also an interesting survey that I know we are keen on doing in the future. And then we'll be able to provide the real-time statistics and see what is actually happening on the ground.
Is this a paper you guys wrote, or is it from?
No, we did not write it. It is one that is comparing marriages and divorce rates in sub-Saharan Africa. So the methodology basically was to use the surveys that the countries have reported and then use those to be able to assess whether there has been an increase, a decrease, it stayed the same, and so on. But the big question now is the analysis of that data.
Okay. To be honest, when I brought up that 70% figure, I was just shocked by it. The person who brought it up to me, I don't know. I didn't get to know him very well, but surely, I'm sure he works in a university. Maybe I'll look for him next time I'm in Nairobi, because I encountered him there. And he's a priest. He was preaching, and he's very thorough with his homilies. So he quotes his stuff. So when he brought this up, I asked him for the source, because at that time I was quite pissed about this amendment bill, and I wanted to write something about it. So he told me he would get me the data, but then the next day he told me he could not, because it was a thesis that had not yet been published. Now, I should have, if I had the time, I would have asked him how they were classifying, divorce, because I'm sure that if you include cohabitations and all these informal marriages, then that number could be that high, because many of those marriages that are not formalized tend to end in separation. So I don't know if they classified those as divorce, or how they defined marriage. So let me just put that out there. I'm not defending or promoting that number. I was just throwing it out there as one of the more shocking pieces of data that I've come across. I will follow whoever wrote this thing in their thesis to their grave and pry the actual number from them. So my impression. Okay, is it that we don't like? Can we do a comparison of countries in Africa? Is it possible with the data that is available right now? Is it possible to do a comparison with other countries, or is it not? And secondly, how accurate are these DHSs? I first encountered them while writing a series of articles on African demography. And I must say, while they tend to be thorough, I don't know how they're controlled. And because they're not like hard science work, I don't know. I don't know how much I should trust them. They're not as high quality as an actual census. Okay, Dr. Wathuta.
Let me throw a spanner. No, not a spanner, as a twig.
No, even a spanner is good.
I hear you. I think, you're actually pointing to, there's a dearth, there's a severe shortage of data from the African continent. Especially now that, understandably in a sense, you said excluding, South Africa is the leading jurisdiction in Africa in terms of research. Yeah. So as much as, of course, would have to make the distinctions that are necessary, they are one of the easier sources of data and research evidence. A few others, maybe some other African countries, for instance, have studies on cohabitation. I don't have the data right now, but yes, definitely there's some research that has been done, especially Southern African research on cohabitation. Okay, I was looking at something a bit different. For instance, it's actually just a map that I had come across, done by the Pew Research Center on polygamous households. They're saying that living in polygamous households is very uncommon in most places. This is not relating directly to divorce, but just saying we benefit more from the studies or surveys that encompass the whole globe. And thankfully, yes, that is something that the UN, to a certain extent, does well, better than the individual countries. We have, many of the African countries have the challenge of having inadequate funding for research, maybe not enough appreciation, but also competing interests and so on. So, but the spanner, now coming to the spanner, what I was going to say, and again, this is something I'm very keen to work more on, is to do a sort of, first of all, an understanding of our context in terms of the level and the quality of marriage preparation. Yeah, so those are among the voices we want to bring into our conference in November. People who are involved in marriage preparation, who are they, how do they do it? To the extent that they've been able to do so far, how are the couples that they have prepared for marriage faring? We have quite a way to go, because we've come across a study, I think it's in the US, that shows how a marriage preparation study is now doing a kind of, maybe if meta-analysis is the right one, but they're doing a study of the couples that they prepared for marriage who later divorced, and they want to understand what it is that led them to divorce, and therefore what they could do to improve their marriage preparation courses. Imagine, so it's not to say we cannot get there, we need to get there sooner, especially with tangible data, but we don't have it yet. But just to say, again, very unscientific, but I was talking to somebody who's based in Ivory Coast. She's an Ivorian who got married early this year, and she was telling me of the preparation that she received in her parish. It is so many notches higher than what many of us know, that I saw clearly that there's something to learn from, even if it's isolated cases like that, because marriage preparation has a lot to do with the success or lack of it of a marriage. Many people say if they'd known, if they understood better what marriage really is and who it is they intended to marry, they may not have married the person they married, or they could have avoided the mistakes that led them to divorce. So I'm just painting the picture of the challenge of getting research data in Africa generally. Again, not to say that we cannot get it as long as governments are keeping some form of records, but I would love it if we also look at the preparation and the quality and the diffusion of it, so that we see how we can improve in that respect. Thank you.
I have a super random question. I hope it's also still relevant. Do we know how many domestic people who are in domestic situations in Kenya are married, or at the very least, the proportion of people who are cohabiting without being married and people who are actually married, according to the definitions that are in the Marriage Act? Is it 1-to-1? For every unmarried couple living together, there's one married couple, or is the ratio in favor of actually married people, or the other way? Do we know this? Is there a way to know this?
I don't know if Sussie has that data, but one thing I can say that I'll pass to Sussie just now. One thing I can say that has, at least in a way, improved the recognition of stable unions is Kenya's Marriage Act of 2014. The fact that customary marriage is one of the regimes that is properly recognized, and also that since then there have been some rules that were introduced to require the registration of customary marriages. It's protective of the parties concerned, especially the woman, also their children, and so on. So for me, it would be interesting to see when we talk about unregistered marriages, is it before the act or before the rules, which I think of 2017, or is it after? But as to the current, I think the survey will have some data on the people who report that they are cohabiting. And maybe Sussie has that. Thanks.
I cannot say that I have come across data on the number of persons who are cohabiting. Although what I have come across in literature now is the form of cohabitation and how it is different from what previous cohabitation was, especially when you're talking about a generational gap. So previously, couples cohabited, and there's increasing, Pew Research says that, and other research bodies, that cohabitation was viewed as a preparation for marriage. I'm obviously not advocating for it, and in fact, there is data that shows that the most couples who cohabit prior to marriage are at a higher risk of divorce. But be that as it may, so the cohabiting, I think I've lost my track, but I'm coming back to it. So the data for persons who are cohabiting, we don't have it, but the form of cohabitation is different. So previously it was, the idea was let's cohabit and test this out and then eventually commit to marriage. That's the previous form of cohabitation. The current form of cohabitation among young people from that research data shows that cohabitation is not a preparation for marriage. In fact, when people are cohabiting, they know or they envision of a future date when this relationship will come to an end. Yeah, so they don't cohabit with the aim of eventually getting married. They cohabit, I think, for the short term, but they know from the word go that there is a time when they will go their separate ways. That same research talked about how being a parent is decoupled from the marriage, so that most young people in that survey said they were more interested in being a parent than being married. So if it's possible to be a parent without being married, then that would be better, they say, right? So those at least are the statistics I know about cohabitation, but the actual number of people.
Sorry to interrupt. Is this in Kenya or this?
No, this is not in Kenya. This is okay. Basically this is in the US, but has been mentioned in other studies when they are talking about the generational differences in marriage.
Okay, because my experience, which I'm sure doesn't. It's just anecdote. All my friends who are in situations, I mean, in who are cohabiting, are doing it because they want to get married. So I think context matters a lot, because the US has their social fabric is way more damaged, I think, than ours. Here, there's still, to the extent that I know my buddies. I have one who lives in Nairobi, even recently got a baby, who was telling me, Bana, Yes, I mean they plan to get married. He's even gone to the girl's parents. They've given him their consent, and they are insured together and all that stuff. But when they got their babies, well, now when they were being asked many questions, because it wasn't just anyway. And but the idea was that okay, we are getting married. It's not we're just cohabiting randomly, and I don't see that happening a lot in Kenya. Even with people who end up being cohabiting for a long time. I mean, I'm talking over 5 years or so. Even they still, at least the ones that I know. I don't know if your experience with the people in similar situations is different, or if it does it bear more on that American experience, or is it still different here? Is it that people here are still doing it because they're preparing for marriage, or at least they are hoping to get married, or they even think of it as marriage?
If I may, okay, sorry, Sussie, I'll leave you just to talk. I'm thinking, maybe still touching on what I said earlier, that I agree that the context matters because there are many people, again, just speaking in a general sense, who live together once the dowry has been paid. Yeah, many people, as we know, still follow the traditional or are required by their families and so on to follow the traditional way of establishing a family in Kenya, which is, the introductions that are done and culminating in the payment of dowry. We know, according to the customary marriage, once dowry is paid or given, then that girl now belongs to the man's family. Yeah. And they could even move in together. They could even start living together. And we know there are families that even require the individuals in question to move in together, even if they're looking to have a church wedding, let us say. Yeah, they don't see a problem with starting to cohabit once the dowry has been paid. So in our case, yes, we'd need to look at that distinction. If the dowry has been paid, then there's a degree of attachment, if you want, that goes beyond cohabitation in the Western sense, because the families have bonded in a way that many times won't happen in the West. Even when they go to a civil wedding or church wedding, sometimes that level of bonding doesn't happen within families. So for us, dowry payment is a decisive practice, as much as it's not recognized in a church sense, in a Christian sense. Still, it has value, as I said, even according to our law, and would need to distinguish. Yeah, so we need to make that decision. And there are many people who will defer the church wedding, or the big wedding. Some call it a white wedding because of the economic costs. Yeah, so they think it's something they have to defer, or that it's not urgent, including because they cannot afford it right then. So we'll get there, Matthew. We're looking actually for research fellows who can come and study and work with us. You guys
have a heck of a lot of work to do, eh?
We have a lot of work. We need researchers, of course, with funding, yeah. And we'll be able to. There's so many questions we need to answer, so many, and you're just touching on some of them. So we're on the same page, just that we are moving gradually. Both of us are working in the law school. This is not even our full-time job, but we believe we'll go far. Even this podcast will help us reach further. Maybe Sussie wants to add something. Thank you.
Yeah, so I agree that we have a lot of work cut out for us to do, and maybe particularly also in how maybe different generations view marriage, view commitment, view the need to get into marriage and so on. So I basically just to agree that there is so much work to be done in different levels, and we will keep at it.
Very good. Sorry, I didn't mean to put you guys on the spot. I know when I look at the work, for example, of what's the name of that? There's a number of family research institutes in the US whose work I see every now and then, and I'm just awed by how much good quality data they have access to. In a bit of a tangential point, I was doing an article recently on because okay, earlier this year the Africa Population and Health Research Center Institute released some data which they claimed to portray the situation on abortion in Liberia. But then I found that their data to be quite, and I hope they don't sue me for this is not slander. This is just my opinion. I found that data to be quite unbelievable. So I did a bit of a deep dive into how they do how they collect their data, and yeah, I hold to the to that initial opinion because I found the work that they're done in other areas, in other parts of the continent as well, including a Kenyan one that keeps being resuscitated all the time. They did one in 2012, and almost every year there's a newspaper article that is based on that old data, which itself was based on a methodology that has never been validated. It has never been validated and produces some very wild variations. So, like I don't know if it's called a confidence interval or whatever. The gap between the high estimate and the low estimate is usually up to half or more of the medium variant estimate, which is a wild number. Even the United Nations, is it UNPD, Population Department, which gives estimates on how the world's population will grow. Even their variations, are not that wild, and they are working with much less accurate projections and stuff like that. So I do understand, because these guys were working with surveys, while other countries like the US, every abortion is reported as like every single one that is done, the CDC has that data. So in fact, that's the other reason why I was worried about the data for these other guys, because it was giving a higher rate in Liberia and in other countries where it is illegal than in the US, where everybody can have an abortion if they want to have it. Well, not now, I suppose. So I understand the constraint that you guys are up against. There's no high quality data. But I don't know why it like the judiciary, for example. Don't they do summaries of how many divorce proceedings have been? Because how many family courts are there in the first place? It's not like there are many. And there are many. I don't know. You three are lawyers. You can hit me on this. But isn't it possible just to have the government collect that information and give it to somebody? Or is it even provided for and nobody does it? Or like why are we suffering so much from low quality or lack of data? I know this is not your fault, but perhaps you have insight into this that I do not.
Perhaps as an I don't know, like a related point on that.
Yeah.
I've seen that the instances where when you have perhaps landmark cases, you would find like there's a lot of contribution from academia in perhaps some of these cases. I don't know how much have the two of you found you are perhaps the research you're doing contributing towards like enriching the jurisprudence in as far as family law is concerned?
Sussie?
So I think I'll respond to Matthew's question. So on the data, we have data. It's just in very many places, and the work now is to aggregate that data. That's where the work is. So because, and also maybe coming from a culture of not a very strong research focus, maybe that is why the situation is as is. But so the question is about if you needed that data, you'd probably, on all divorces, you'd probably have to go speak to all the registrars and aggregate that data, because the legal researchers do a different job in the judiciary other than that specific type of work. However, LR, I know, is doing something that will enable data analytics. So on the cases that are reported in court, as we go on, they are reworking their page, and data analytics will be something that is possible to do very quickly on that page. So there's hope, but also there's again a lot of work to be done.
For the audience, KLR is Kenya Law Reports, right?
Right.
Okay, excellent. Who's going to tackle Aflatun's question? Are you guys starting to see a pipeline between your work and jurisprudence? Or if I didn't use that term correctly, then whatever I meant.
It's a good question. Again, I think it's in part homework for us. Sussie has mentioned judiciary has legal researchers. She herself has been a legal researcher in the judiciary, although for in the space of environment, if I remember correctly. So there's room for us to make that connection, not so much with the legal researchers, I'd say, although they are welcome to reach out when they need to, but more so with the judges sitting in the family division, some of whom, the advantage that we're in a law school is that we're already acquainted with some of them. Again, this symposium will help us to reach them in at least one or two as invited guests. Our collaboration with KCPF, Kenya Christian Professionals Forum, also allows us to offer our support and research in terms of even petitions that may be made in matters of public interest, or when certain advocates want to appear as friends of the court and so on. So again, that's an area where we can contribute more, and we're trying to make our presence felt in a way that we can also be a go-to person internally and externally as well. Yeah, thanks.
Maybe Dr. Wathuta could probably comment on her involvement in the National Family Policy for Kenya that was just approved, because I think that ties to policy directly.
Oh, you're right. Yeah,
I was going to bring that up as the final
I
question,
see.
But seeing that we only have 4 minutes left of this session, actually, just do it, and we close with this one.
Okay. Yeah, good point. Thanks, Sussie, for the reminder. Maybe the best thing is that it has recently been approved. The National Family Promotion and Protection Policy has recently been passed by government. Interestingly, also, when the Attorney General was said that the amendment bill on the Marriage Act is not going to proceed, he made a mention of family policy in a way that to me then is tied to the recent development of the approval of the policy. So in the previous government, it had already gone to cabinet and AG level. Wider stakeholder engagement and input was required, and that happened. So it's a process that has taken almost about a decade for it to see the light of day. So yes, Family Institute, Strathmore, has been involved in the development of the policy. Personally, also, I was approached by, I did a consultancy, a short one, for the United Nations Department for Economic and Social Affairs, that is UNDESA. They're the ones who promote the family policies all over the world, as well as the International Day and International Year of the Family. But the next year will be the 30th anniversary of the International Year of the Family. So IFS supports these initiatives directly. We've worked with the State Department for Social Protection and so on. But yes, on the family policy, although I wasn't part of the technical working group, but nonetheless, I supported, formally, I wasn't a member of the technical working group, but I did support the latter part of the process that led eventually now to the adoption of the policy, and also its analysis. The UNDESA consultancy was about analyzing the policy in light of the SDGs, and I wrote a report on that, inspired also in some AU document on the family, plan of action on the family. And that was the basis of a workshop that was held in 2019 in Nairobi, supported by UNDESA and other organizations. So yeah, we are having our bearing but in a collaborative way, and we look forward to doing more in that regard. Very recently also, I spoke in the Budapest Demographic Summit. I was a panelist, also bringing the African perspective to that platform, which had a number of countries participating. And again, we hope that we will continue to contribute to, in terms of making the African perspective known within the continent and beyond. Thank you.
Well, Dr. Wathuta and Sussie, thank you guys so much for agreeing to appear. By the way, I'm seeing, I would want this conversation to go longer, but because it's like we're only just beginning. But I think also we need to give you guys time to eat something. Even I need to eat. So we'll end it here. Maybe some parting shots within 5 seconds, each of you. Starting with Sussie.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you for inviting us. You will keep seeing us in the spaces that produce quality data around family strengthening. Thank you.
Okay, and my parting shot would be to say that marriage is good. Marriage is good for the individuals and also for the public. It's good for the adults who marry, it's good for the children, it's good for the extended family. So we should do our best to help people prepare well for marriage, stay in marriage, and avoid divorce to the extent that it can be avoided. And if not, then to try and reduce the negative outcomes for the various members of the family. Thank you.
Amen to that. Thank you so much, and have yourselves a good evening.
You too. Thank you, Matthew and Aflatun. Nice evening.
Thank you.